"Sir, could you pretend to be my daddy? Just for one day?" That was all she said, standing alone in the middle of a crowded bookstore, clutching a worn-out teddy bear. He was a powerful CEO, grieving the son he lost. She was a little girl, just 6 years old, looking for something most adults couldn't name belonging. But what began as one innocent question would unravel a story no one expected. A single moment that would challenge everything he thought he knew about success, identity, and love. Who was this girl, and why did she choose him? What was her mother hiding behind tired eyes and silent strength, and how far would powerful people go to take her away, simply because of how she looked, where she lived, and who loved her? This isn't just a story about a man and a child. It's about chosen family, invisible barriers, and the quiet war against prejudice that still haunts everyday life. Are you ready to feel something real? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, because what you're about to witness might just change the way you see the world. Now, let's begin. The air that morning felt heavier than it should have. Ellis Monroe adjusted his charcoal gray coat as he stepped onto the curb at 7th and Madison. Steam curling up from the sidewalk grates beside him. The Portland sky was doing that thing it always did this time of year, gray without promise, cold without purpose. Traffic muttered past like tired breath. He stood there in silence, waiting for the crosswalk signal to change, one hand tucked into his coat pocket, the other holding a cup of lukewarm coffee he'd stopped caring about 3 sips ago. He wasn't really there, not mentally, anyway. His mind was somewhere else, somewhere 5 years behind him, somewhere in a hospital room with wires and monitors that beeped until they didn't. Somewhere in the silent aftermath of losing the only person who'd ever called him Daddy, Jordan. Just as the light blinked to walk, a small tug at his coat broke his trance. "Sir," a voice piped, soft but clear. "Could you pretend to be my daddy?" Just for one day, Ellis froze. He turned slowly, unsure if he'd imagined it, unsure if the voice was real, or if grief had started to take on a shape. But there she was, standing no taller than his waist, wearing a puffy yellow coat with one button undone, a red backpack with a torn strap, and 2 fuzzy gloves that didn't match. Her braids were tied with ribbon, one of them unraveling. Her boots looked a size too big, hand-me-down maybe. Her eyes wide, brown, wet with something between hope and hesitation, looked up at him with unfiltered expectation. He blinked. "What? Did you say?" The little girl stepped closer, her boots squeaking slightly against the wet sidewalk. "Tomorrow's Father's Day at my school. Everyone's bringing their dad." She looked down at her gloves for a second, then back up. "I don't got one." Silence stretched between them like winter fog. "I saw you," she added, almost in a whisper. "You look like someone who'd be good at pretending. Just one day. That's all." Ellis stared. There were 1,000 things he should have said. Something responsible, something dismissive, something safe. But his voice caught, because now that he really saw her, really looked something twisted in his chest. The red backpack. Jordan had one just like it in kindergarten. The same tear along the shoulder. Those mismatched gloves, his son used to lose one every week. Swearing astronauts only wore one glove to steer spaceships. Even the way she tilted her head slightly to the left when she asked a question that was Jordan, too. "You look like someone who knows how to fix broken things," she said softly, like she didn't even know what she was doing to him. He couldn't speak. Not yet. He looked down at his shoes. They were wet from the melting snow, and suddenly, he felt like he was sinking into the sidewalk. The moment was broken by a shout from across the street. "Nova, what did we talk about a woman called jogging toward them?" The little girl turned. "Mom, it's okay. I was just asking. I know what you were asking." The woman stopped, breathless, tucking a loose curl behind her ear. Her coat was thin, her hands ungloved and red from cold. She gave Ellis a quick, embarrassed glance. "I'm sorry, sir. She's been talking about this Father's Day thing all week, but I didn't think she'd actually—" Her voice trailed off. Ellis finally found his own. "It's all right," he said. "Really?" The woman offered a sheepish smile. "Rhea Bell, this is my daughter, Nova." He nodded, still trying to gather his thoughts. "Ellis Monroe." Her eyes widened just a little. "Monroe? You're not Monroe Green Tech." He nodded once. "Not proud, not humble, just tired. We met years ago," she said. "I used to run the literacy nights at East Side Library. Your company donated those smart boards." He nodded again, slower this time. "I remember." She smiled faintly, and for a moment, Ellis saw the weight behind her eyes. Sleepless nights, solo parenting, holding it all together with tape and prayer. Nova tugged at her mom's coat. "Can he come?" "Mom, please." Rhea crouched to meet her daughter's eyes. "Honey, he's probably very busy." Ellis looked at Nova, then Rhea, then down at his gloved hands. "I'll do it," he said suddenly. Rhea blinked. I'll come, if it's okay with you." Nova gasped. "Really?" "What time?" Ellis asked. 8:15, Rhea said slowly, almost unsure this was happening. "South entrance, room 2C." Nova was already beaming. "I'll wear my sparkly sneakers." Ellis managed a chuckle. "A real one." "Good. I'll look for them." Rhea stood, pulling her coat tighter. "Are you sure you don't even know us?" "I know enough," he said. Then, after a pause, "Sometimes pretending feels realer than silence." Rhea didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. "Thank you. For real." Nova stepped forward and reached for his hand. "You're gonna be great," she whispered. "You look like someone who doesn't give up." That night, Ellis didn't sleep. Not because of work, not because of the board meeting he was supposed to prepare for, but because a little girl with ribbon in her hair and mismatched gloves had walked right past all his defenses with a sentence. "You look like someone who knows how to fix broken things." He stood by his bedroom window, staring out at the quiet city. Snow was falling now, softly, gently, blanketing everything in quiet forgiveness. Behind him, on the nightstand, sat a box he hadn't touched in years. Inside it a photo of Jordan, one of his old Lego astronauts, and a race car with a chipped wheel. Ellis opened the box for the first time in almost a decade. He touched the photo with careful fingers. Then, slowly, he placed Nova's drawing, two stick figures holding hands beside it. Just for one day, he told himself, but something deep inside whispered, or maybe more. Ellis didn't go into the office the next morning. He tried. He showered, shaved, even buttoned his shirt up to the collar like he always did. But as he stood in front of his closet, scanning rows of tailored suits and pressed ties, nothing felt right. Every navy blue jacket and silk cufflink felt like armor, and he wasn't sure he wanted to wear armor today. Instead, he settled on a soft gray sweater, wool coat, and dark jeans still clean, still quiet, but less like a man attending a board meeting and more like a man trying to be present. He didn't know why he cared so much. It was one day, one classroom, one little girl who still didn't know how dangerous it was to trust strangers with gentle voices. He checked his watch. 7:44 a.m. His driver offered to take him, but Ellis declined. He needed to walk, feel the sidewalk under his shoes, breathe the cold air in his lungs, remind himself that this moment wasn't about strategy or optics. At 8:07 a.m., he stood outside the south entrance of Buckley Elementary. A few other fathers were already waiting, some in suits, clutching lattes and glancing at phones, others in construction gear or scrubs, shifting from foot to foot like they had taken a detour on the way to real life. Ellis wondered which category he fell into now. Mr. Monroe. He turned at the sound of his name. Rhea was approaching, bundled in a faded peacoat, a scarf tucked tightly under her chin. Her hair was pulled into a quick bun, and exhaustion still clung to her eyes, though today it looked a little softer. She smiled shy, unsure. "You came." He nodded. "I said I would." Before she could respond, a flash of yellow came barreling down the sidewalk. "Mr. M." Nova shouted, running straight into him, her sparkly sneakers flashing beneath her pink tights. She grabbed his hand without hesitation, like they'd done this 1,000 times. "You really came." He crouched slightly to match her height. "Of course I did. I said I'd be your pretend dad today." She beamed. Best day ever, inside the school. The hallway buzzed with the kind of chaos only elementary schools could manage, shoes squeaking, laughter bouncing off lockers, posters of spelling bees and recycled art lining the walls. A staff member handed Ellis a name tag, Dad, for a day, guest. He peeled the back and stuck it over his sweater, oddly aware of the weight of it. Room 2C was small, colorful, filled with art projects and laminated name tags taped to desks. The other children looked up as Nova entered, still gripping Ellis's hand. "This is Mr. M," she announced proudly. "He's borrowing me today." The teacher, a woman in her early 30s with kind eyes and a warm smile, approached. "You must be Nova's guest." Dad Ellis extended his hand. "Ellis Monroe." Her eyebrows lifted faintly, recognition flickering, but she didn't say anything about his last name, only smiled. "Welcome. I'm Miss Emery. We're glad you're here." The morning was a mix of structured chaos, paper crafts, reading circles, a dad quiz worksheet filled with questions like, "What's your favorite snack?" and "Can you do a cartwheel?" Ellis tried his best to keep up. Nova guided him through each activity with the confidence of a cruise director. He likes coffee, no sugar, he's super tall, and he's probably really good at fixing stuff, like superhero good. He chuckled more than he expected to. The sound surprised him every time. At one point, they sat on a rug while Miss Emery read a book aloud about a bear and its cub getting lost in a storm. Nova leaned her head against his arm, and Ellis felt something unfamiliar and disorienting comfort when the cub in the story cried, "Daddy, don't let go." Ellis looked down at Nova. She was watching him. He forced himself to smile, but his chest ached. During snack time, while the kids devoured applesauce and pretzels, Ellis stepped out into the hallway. He needed a moment, just a breath. Rhea was sitting on a bench near the front entrance, clutching a paper cup of coffee. She looked up as he approached. "I was wondering if you'd disappear," she said, her voice gentle. "I needed air." She nodded. "I remember the first time I sat in that room. My stomach was in knots. I kept wondering if Nova was watching the other kids and wishing for what she didn't have. Ellis sat beside her, resting his elbows on his knees. I didn't expect this to feel so. He trailed off. Human, she offered. He looked at her. Yeah, that. She sipped her coffee. You don't have to stay the whole day. I want to, he said. Rhea studied his profile. There were lines at the corners of his eyes, but not from smiling. More like someone who'd been staring at the sun for too long without blinking. She hasn't stopped talking about you, she said. You're already part of her story now. Ellis didn't know how to respond to that. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small drawing Nova's from the day before. 2 stick figures, one with sparkly shoes, one with tall black boots, holding hands under a rainbow. She gave this to me, said it was us. She draws a lot of things she wants to remember, Rhea said softly, especially people. He folded the paper carefully and tucked it back into his coat. She's bright, kind, a little fearless. Rhea smiled faintly, too much like her father, sometimes. Ellis tilted his head. He's not around. Rhea shook her head. He left before she was born. I think he was scared, or maybe just selfish. Either way, she's never known him. Ellis didn't pry, but a quiet thought lodged in his chest like a stone. She deserves more than memories she never got to make. He looked over at her hands. One was wrapped tightly around the paper coffee cup. The knuckles red from cold, fingernails chipped, a slight tremble in her left ring finger. She caught him looking and laughed softly. Yeah, real glamorous, huh? I think strength looks different than most people expect, he said. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she turned to him. Why did you say yes? He hesitated. I lost my son years ago. Jordan. He was 6. Rhea didn't move, didn't speak, and yesterday, a little girl with mismatched gloves and too much hope asked me a question I didn't know I needed to answer. He glanced at her. I think part of me has been waiting to be asked for a long time. She nodded, lips pressed tightly. Thank you for showing up. He stood. I'll walk her home, if that's okay. Rhea looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Just, don't promise her things you can't keep. He hesitated. I won't. When he returned to the classroom, Nova looked up from her drawing and grinned. There you are, she said. I was telling them how good you are at listening. Ellis knelt beside her. I'm still learning, he said quietly. She handed him a crumpled paper. Another drawing. This one showed 3 people Nova, her mom and him. A dog stood beside them, even though they didn't own one. Above their heads, Nova had written, My family. For real, even if it's just today. Ellis's throat tightened. He smoothed the paper gently. Maybe tomorrow, too, he whispered. Nova beamed. He didn't notice Rhea standing at the door, watching them. She smiled, but only a little. The walk to Nova's apartment after school was only 6 blocks, but it felt longer. Ellis held her hand the whole way, not because she needed it, but because he did. She chattered beside him like a wind-up radio. Her words danced between spelling tests and snack trades. Stories about a girl named Taylor who had 3 dads but only one that she actually likes, and a detailed rundown of which swing at the park squeaked the least. He nodded where he could, listening with more attention than he gave some of his board meetings. Her voice had rhythm, like sunlight through blinds, warm but splintered, and every now and then She paused mid-sentence just to glance up at him, like she was making sure he hadn't disappeared. The sky had started to dim by the time they reached the rust-colored brick building on Alder Street. It wasn't run down, but it wasn't polished either. A place of scraped paint and tired stairs. He followed Nova up 2 flights to apartment 3B, where she stopped, grinned, and pulled out a key tied to a shoelace. "Mom always forgets hers," she said proudly, unlocking the door. Inside was warmth. Not the kind you buy with money, but the kind stitched together with routines. The smell of garlic and something boiling filled the air. Books stacked in corners, a coat rack missing one peg, a calendar on the wall with stars drawn over certain dates, most of them in Nova's handwriting. Rhea was in the kitchen, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled up, stirring a pot of spaghetti. "You made it," she said with a tired smile. "Hope you're hungry." "I could eat," Ellis replied, glancing around. The apartment was small but clean, lived in. A framed photo on the bookshelf caught his eye, Rhea holding a newborn, looking scared but radiant. Another frame held a drawing Nova must have made years ago. It said, "Me and Mommy against the world." They sat down to eat at a round table pushed against the wall. Nova talked the whole time, spinning stories and slurping noodles. Rhea watched her with a mix of love and alertness, like a mother who had learned the world was too sharp to look away from it for long. "You don't have to stay for dinner," she said at one point, not unkindly. "I know," Ellis replied. "I want to—" There was a silence then, not heavy, but curious. Nova slid her cup toward him. "Can you open my apple juice?" He smiled and twisted the cap. "See," she said to her mom, "told you he's good at strong stuff." After dinner. Rhea washed dishes while Nova dragged Ellis to her room. It was small, with a window facing a parking lot. The bed was covered in stars, a blanket stitched with moons and comets, clearly homemade. Stuffed animals lined the edge like sentries. "This is Rufus," she said, handing him a threadbare bear missing an ear. "He's a good listener, too, but sometimes he gets crumbs in his fur." Ellis took the bear gently, nodding as if Rufus had just shared something very important. Then she opened her toy chest and dug around, pulling out a small plastic airplane. The wings were chipped, and the tail had been taped more than once. "This was my real daddy's," she said, not looking at him. "He gave it to Mom before he left. She said I could have it when I turned 5. Ellis felt his breath catch. He never came back. Nova shook her head. "It's okay. I got used to it, but sometimes I still wish someone would just stay." She offered him the plane. "You can borrow it if you want." He hesitated, then accepted it. "I'll take good care of it," he said. "You better," she whispered. "It's the last thing he ever gave me." Later. Rhea stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching them. Her eyes were unreadable. "She's never let anyone touch that before," she said quietly. Ellis turned. "She trusts easy." "No," Rhea said. "She trusts very carefully." They sat on the couch after Nova went to bed, 2 cups of chamomile tea between them. Rhea tucked her legs under her. "I didn't expect today to feel like this." "Like what?" "Like I was watching my daughter remember what it feels like to be safe." Ellis stared into his tea. Rhea continued. "Most days I can handle everything. The bills, the questions, the weird looks when I tell people I don't know who her father is. But today I felt small, because she looked at you like you were the answer to a question she's never been brave enough to ask." Ellis said nothing for a long time. Then, quietly, And what if I don't have the answer? Then you leave before she believes you do." That landed hard. He looked at her. "Would you rather I never came at all?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "I know this world has a way of breaking promises before they're even made. And I've spent years trying to make sure she never feels like a borrowed child. I don't see her that way. You don't yet." He set down his cup. "I lost my son," he said again, slower this time. "His name was Jordan. I was driving. One missed stop sign and he swallowed hard. I never forgave myself." Rhea's face softened. "Ellis." He shook his head. "Every time I tried to move forward, it felt like betrayal. And then yesterday, Nova looked at me like I was still worth something." "You are," she said gently. "I don't know how to be someone's father anymore." Rhea met his eyes. "Maybe she's not asking you to be. Maybe she's just asking you not to run." He leaned back, exhaling. "I don't want to be a ghost in her story," he said. "Then stay present in it," she replied. When he left that night, he stood outside their apartment for a moment, staring at the stairwell. The plastic airplane was still in his coat pocket. He didn't go straight home. Instead, he walked, block after block, past closed cafes and silent streetlights, past the park bench where Jordan had once eaten ice cream, chocolate dripping onto his shirt. He sat down eventually beneath a bare maple tree and pulled out the plane. Its chipped wing felt familiar, fragile, just like him. He turned it over in his hands, then looked up at the sky. No stars tonight, just clouds. But somewhere behind them, he knew the sky was still there, and maybe, just maybe so was he. The following Saturday, Ellis found himself standing outside apartment 3B again. He wasn't sure if it was a mistake. He'd told himself he would give them space, that one day had been enough. But something about the way Nova had hugged him at the school gate, the way Rhea had lingered in the doorway with questions in her eyes and no words to voice them, something about all of it had stayed with him. He knocked. Inside, shuffling footsteps. Then the door creaked open halfway. Nova peeked out. "You came back," she whispered, like it was a secret she wasn't supposed to say too loud. Ellis knelt. "If it's all right." She swung the door open without answering, throwing her arms around him. "It smells like garlic in here," he said. Nova nodded seriously. "We're making spaghetti. Real sauce, not the kind from a can." Rhea appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She paused at the sight of him, eyebrows raised, eyes soft but wary. "You don't like texting first, do you?" she said, half a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "I wasn't sure I'd get an answer." She stepped aside, gesturing him in. "You would have." The apartment looked the same as last time, books still stacked like towers, drawings taped to the fridge, a single candle flickering on the counter. It smelled like warmth, like basil and something deeper, familiar. "You're just in time," Rhea said, turning back to the stove. Nova insisted on setting the table herself. "I use the fancy forks," Nova called from the dining nook. "They're plastic," Rhea whispered to Ellis, "but she means well." Ellis chuckled. They sat down 10 minutes later. Nova took her seat with pride, hands folded. She wore a paper crown she'd made that morning in art class, glitter still falling from the edges. "Welcome to Princess Nova's royal dinner," she announced. "Tonight's menu: spaghetti, juice, and secret dessert." Ellis bowed in mock reverence. "An honor, Your Highness." As they passed bowls and shared laughs, The rhythm felt oddly natural. Nova filled the air with stories about school, and Rhea filled the silences with questions that weren't really questions. "Do you cook often?" Ellis shrugged. "Not anymore. Used to make pancakes every Sunday." "For your son?" "Yeah. He liked his with blueberries and too much syrup." "Sounds like someone I know," Rhea said, nodding toward Nova. Nova pretended not to hear, focused intently on twirling noodles around her fork. Later, as they cleared the table, Rhea handed Ellis a dish towel. "Since you're part of the royal court, you get kitchen duty," she said. They stood side by side at the sink. Steam curled from the hot water as she rinsed, and he dried. It was domestic, simple, almost disarming. "Thank you," Rhea said suddenly. He looked at her. For what? For showing up again? For not vanishing after the fairy tale ended? He was quiet a moment. "I wasn't sure you'd want me back." "I wasn't sure either," she admitted. "But Nova asked every day if you were coming. And you." She paused. "I asked myself if I could handle it if you did." He nodded slowly. "Fair." She reached into the drying rack and handed him the last plate. Their fingers brushed, just slightly, but it was enough to stop the rhythm. "Ellis," she said softly. He waited. "I need to know what this is for you." He met her eyes. "I don't know yet," he answered honestly. "But it's not a game. I've worked hard to make sure no one treats her like a project. I don't see her that way." "I believe you," Rhea said. "But she's building something around you. I see it in her drawings, in the way she says your name. You're becoming a part of her scaffolding." Ellis looked down. "She gave me a picture," he said. "Us holding hands under a rainbow. She said it was for just one day, but she taped it to the fridge. She's waiting to see if that picture stays true." He folded the towel slowly. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Go ahead." "Are you afraid I'll leave Rhea?" Didn't answer right away. She wiped her hands on her jeans, then leaned against the counter. "I'm afraid I'll start hoping you won't." That stayed in the air between them, long enough for Nova to come skipping back into the kitchen holding something behind her back. "Time for secret dessert," she declared. She pulled out 3 paper bowls filled with chocolate pudding, each one topped with whipped cream and a single gummy bear. "I made them myself," she said proudly. "Gourmet," Ellis said, accepting his bowl. They sat at the table again, this time quieter, the kind of quiet that settles in when people are learning to breathe around each other. Nova pulled a folded sheet of paper from her jacket and handed it to Ellis. "I wrote you a poem," she said. Ellis unfolded it. Crayon scribbles filled the page in uneven lines. "M is tall and kind. He helps me when I fall behind. He listens when I talk and never hurries when we walk. He makes me feel like stars are near. And when he leaves, I wish he's here." He stared at the words. His throat tightened. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he folded the poem carefully, placed it in his coat pocket like it was made of glass, and looked at Nova. "That's the best thing anyone's ever written about me." She smiled shyly. "I wrote it in class. Taylor says poems are like magic spells." "I think she's right," he said. Rhea looked at him across the table, and for the first time, she didn't look guarded. She looked grateful. As the evening wound down, Ellis stood in the doorway, ready to leave. Nova ran to him again, arms tied around his waist. "You can come back tomorrow if you want," she said into his coat. "I'll try," he whispered. Rhea stood nearby, arms crossed, watching him. "Good night," she said. He nodded. "Good night." But just before he left, she called out softly, "Ellis." He turned. "I kept something," she said, "from her father. I almost threw it away years ago." She walked to the shelf and opened a small box. Inside was a photo, faded and creased, of a man holding baby Nova, expression stiff, almost reluctant. Rhea held it out. She asked me once if he ever loved her. Ellis took the photo, studied it, then handed it back gently. "She'll never need to ask that about you." Rhea swallowed. He left then. The photo still burned into his memory. That night, he placed Nova's poem beside Jordan's memory box, and for the first time in 5 years, he added something new to it, not a relic of the past, but a thread of the present. The next morning, Ellis sat alone in his living room, the early sunlight filtering through half-drawn blinds. A gentle hush filled the space, as if the air itself had softened. The city was still waking up the distant sound of delivery trucks, heels clicking on pavement, pigeons scratching across the rooftop. But inside his home, it was silent, too silent. He glanced toward the coffee table where the memory box rested. He hadn't meant to open it again, hadn't touched it since he slipped Nova's crayon poem inside. For 5 years, it had remained sealed a coffin for moments he couldn't relive without breaking. Inside were the things grief had deemed sacred: a child's sock with a cartoon astronaut, Jordan's old wooden toy car with the left wheel missing, a birthday card drawn in scribbles and stars. He opened the lid slowly, like it might explode. The scent of old paper and fabric hit him first. Memory had a smell. It always did. Faint, dusty, intimate. He reached inside and lifted the toy car. The paint had chipped further along one edge. He could still hear Jordan's voice. "Go fast." Daddy. Faster than the moon, as if it were folded into the wood itself. And there it was, beneath the toy, folded carefully, the photo of Jordan and Ellis, taken at the Science Museum the summer before the accident. Both smiling, both unaware that their forever was running out. Ellis leaned back into the couch and let out a breath that trembled. He didn't cry. Not because he didn't want to, but because something about Nova's poem, her small voice echoing when he leaves, "I wish he's here," had stirred a kind of resolve in him. He couldn't live his whole life inside a box of endings. He picked up his phone and texted Rhea. "Are you two free this afternoon? I was thinking of taking Nova somewhere important." The reply came 6 minutes later. "We're free. But we're somewhere she's never been. Somewhere I haven't had the strength to return." That afternoon, the 3 of them drove 45 minutes out of the city. Rhea sat up front with him. Nova, buckled in the back, was humming along to a soft melody she made up on the spot. Something about dandelions, muffins, and airplanes. Ellis glanced at Rhea occasionally. Her face remained neutral, though her eyes flicked toward him every so often. She hadn't asked where they were going. She hadn't needed to. About 10 miles from the turnoff, Ellis finally spoke. "There's a place, a hill. It overlooks the water." Rhea nodded, letting him finish at his pace. "I used to take Jordan there every year on his birthday. Just us. We'd fly a kite, eat peanut butter sandwiches, and lie in the grass naming cloud animals." Nova leaned forward between the seats. "Can we name cloud animals too?" Ellis smiled faintly. "That's the plan." The hill was quiet when they arrived. Winter had faded, but spring hadn't fully taken root. The grass was a dull green, patchy in places, damp underfoot. The wind tugged gently at their coats. Nova raced ahead, arms outstretched like airplane wings. Rhea walked beside Ellis. Slower, more careful. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "No, but I'm here." They reached the top of the hill. A small wooden bench overlooked the river, the view stretching far beyond the horizon. Beside the bench, a tree tall and bare wore a small copper plaque at its base, in memory of Jordan Monroe, loved beyond stars. Nova stopped in front of it. "This is your boy?" she asked softly. Ellis nodded. "He's really lucky." He blinked. "Why's that?" "Because he got you first." Ellis turned away, pressing his lips tightly. Nova looked up at the tree, then back at him. "Can I give him something?" Ellis crouched beside her. "What would you like to give?" She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a hair ribbon, one of her favorites, pink with tiny white clouds. "He might like this, in case he wants to tie it to a kite." Rhea inhaled sharply behind them, her hand covering her mouth. Ellis accepted the ribbon gently. He'd love it. He tied it around one of the lower branches. It fluttered in the breeze like it belonged there. They sat on the bench in silence for a while. Rhea placed her hand near Ellis's, not quite touching, but close enough that he could feel its warmth. "I haven't been here since the funeral," he said. "You don't have to say more." "I think I do," he replied. "Because this bringing you both here, it's not about replacing anyone. It's about remembering how it felt to belong." Rhea looked out over the water. "Maybe it's about letting yourself be chosen again." Ellis swallowed. "She said I make her feel like stars are near." "She meant it," Rhea said softly. "Later." They lay on the grass, all three of them naming cloud shapes. "That one's a turtle with glasses." Nova pointed. "No way," Ellis teased. "It's a dancing octopus." Rhea chuckled. "You two need to get your eyes checked. It's obviously a cow riding a bicycle." Nova gasped. "Mama wins." They laughed, loudly, honestly, and for a while, it was as if the hill was holding more than just memory. It was holding hope. As the sun began to lower, Ellis walked a few paces alone, looking out over the river. The ribbon danced on the wind behind him. He reached into his coat pocket and unfolded Nova's poem again, smoothing it with care. He read it aloud, slowly, voice barely above a whisper. When he finished, he closed his eyes and said Jordan's name out loud, not with pain this time, but with peace. Behind him, small footsteps approached. Nova took his hand. "Can I come back here with you again sometime?" He looked down at her, heart aching in the way only love makes it ache. "Every year," he said, "if you'll have me." She nodded. "Me and you, and Mama, and maybe Rufus." "Of course," he smiled, "especially Rufus." Back in the car, as Nova drifted to sleep in the back seat, Ellis drove slowly through the winding roads. Rhea spoke softly. Today wasn't easy, but it mattered. He nodded. "Thank you for coming. She trusts you. I see it more every day." "And you?" he asked, eyes still on the road. Rhea was quiet for a long time. "I don't want her to be the only one." She finally said, "That night, back in his apartment, Ellis didn't put the memory box away. He left it open, and beside it, he placed something new, a pink ribbon, gently knotted, fluttering still with the breeze of one quiet, sacred hill." Ellis stood outside the coffee shop on 14th Avenue, his breath visible in the crisp spring morning air. He watched the crowds drift past parents pushing strollers, teenagers chatting on their phones, couples holding hands, to the world. It was just another day in Portland. But for Ellis, it was a moment that felt like the calm before a storm. He adjusted his jacket and reached into his pocket. Fingers brushing against Nova's poem folded neatly inside. He pulled it out and glanced at the scribbled lines once again, the innocent words grounding him. Mr. M is tall and kind. He helps me when I fall behind. He listens when I talk and never hurries when we walk. He makes me feel like stars are near, and when he leaves, I wish he's here. Those words echoed in his mind as he walked into the shop. Inside, the air was warm with the scent of roasted beans and cinnamon. He scanned the room and spotted Rhea sitting at a corner table, her laptop open but unattended. Nova was beside her, her face glued to a picture book, eyes wide with wonder. Ellis approached quietly. "Good morning." Rhea looked up, surprised but pleased. "You're early. I wanted to get here before the meeting." Rhea nodded. "I called the school last night. They want to talk to us about the upcoming family day." Nova looked up, her eyes bright. "Can I bring Mr. M again?" "We'll see," Rhea said, forcing a smile. Ellis pulled out a chair and sat beside them. The cafe's chatter faded as he caught his breath. "Family day," he murmured. "That's tomorrow." "Right." Rhea nodded, eyes flickering with unease. "Yeah, they want parents, guardians, whoever." Ellis thought of the last time Nova had been at school, clutching his hand as if it was the only thing steady in the room. He thought of the empty chair beside her, and the whispers he'd caught out of the corner of his ear, the curious glances, the sideways smiles. "Have you told Nova about the board meeting?" he asked gently. Rhea shook her head. "Not yet. I'm trying to shield her from the politics." Ellis frowned. "You shouldn't have to." She sighed. "I know, but some people don't understand. They see you as a visitor, a placeholder." He swallowed. The truth stung. "They question my fitness," she added quietly. "They say I'm unstable, that Nova needs a real family." Ellis's jaw clenched. "Who says that the library board, Gregory Sloane and his wife, Evelyn?" Ellis's mind flashed to the brief meeting with Sloane he'd had months ago, a man whose smile never reached his eyes, whose handshakes felt like contracts signed in shadows. "They've been trying to take custody from me," Rhea continued, "saying I'm reckless, that Nova would be better off in their care." Ellis stared at her. "That's unbelievable. It's not just talk," she said. "Last week, I got a call from the school counselor. Someone reported that I was neglecting Nova." Ellis's heart pounded. "Did they say who?" Rhea shook her head. "No, but I know it's them." Nova, sensing the tension, closed her book and looked between them. "Is everything okay?" Rhea forced a smile. "Yes, baby. Everything's fine." Ellis reached across the table and took Nova's small hand in his. "We're going to make sure it stays that way." Rhea's eyes softened. "I don't know how to fight this alone." "You won't have to," Ellis said firmly. The next day, Ellis found himself in the school auditorium alongside Rhea and Nova. Rows of parents, guardians, and children filled the seats. The energy was a mixture of excitement and nerves. Nova clung to Ellis's hand as they took their places. He squeezed her fingers reassuringly. When the principal stepped onto the stage and welcomed everyone, Ellis caught a few eyes curious, skeptical, some openly judgmental. He felt it prick at his skin. The afternoon passed with storytelling, games, and shared laughter. Ellis read a story to Nova's class, his voice steady even when his heart threatened to betray him. Between activities, he noticed whispers and pointed glances. Some parents exchanged knowing looks when they saw him and Nova together. At one point, a woman approached Rhea quietly. "I hope you understand," she said with a polite smile. "It's hard for some of us to see a man who isn't related to the child playing such a big role." Rhea nodded, her jaw tight. Ellis stepped in. "Ellis Monroe," he said calmly, extending a hand. "I'm not just playing a role." The woman hesitated, then shook his hand. "I'm Karen. I didn't mean to be rude." Ellis smiled gently. "I know. It's just hard sometimes. Later." Nova ran to the stage to show off her sparkly sneakers. She smiled proudly at Ellis, who caught her in a warm embrace. After the event, as they walked home, Ellis could feel the weight of unseen eyes following them. "Did you notice the looks?" Nova asked softly. Ellis nodded. "People have questions, like why you're not my real dad." He paused. "What do you think?" She shrugged. "I think you're the dad who shows up." That was all he needed. Back at the apartment, Rhea sat quietly while Ellis helped Nova with homework. "Do you think it's going to get worse?" Rhea asked. Ellis looked up from the math problem he was explaining. "Maybe, but we'll face it together." Rhea smiled, a flicker of hope breaking through her worry. That night, Ellis sat alone on his balcony, the city lights flickering beneath him like distant stars. He held Nova's poem again, tracing the words with his thumb. His phone buzzed, a message from Rhea. "Thank you for everything." He stared into the night sky and whispered, "We're not just pretending anymore." The weeks that followed Family Day were a blur for Ellis, Rhea, and Nova. The warmth of their growing bond was met by whispers, sideways glances, and subtle reminders that their newfound family was not without its challengers. Ellis had returned to his office with a renewed sense of purpose, but found that not all welcomed the change. The once friendly board members now regarded him with thinly veiled suspicion. A few clients canceled meetings citing distractions he couldn't quite name. The media caught wind of his association with Nova and Rhea and began to spin narratives that made his chest tighten with each new headline. At home. Rhea tried to shield Nova from the storm, but the child sensed the tension. Some nights, Nova would wake and ask, "Mommy, why do people whisper when they see us?" Rhea would hold her close and whisper, "Because sometimes people fear what they don't understand." One morning, Ellis received a message that set his heart pounding. An anonymous tip-off claimed that he was using Rhea and Nova for personal gain, a smear campaign designed to isolate and intimidate. He showed the message to Rhea, who clenched her fists but refused to let the fear show. "We knew it wouldn't be easy," Ellis said quietly. "I'm not going to let them break us," Rhea replied, voice steady. The tension crescendoed at the next library board meeting, where Gregory Sloan once again attempted to leverage his influence to undermine Rhea's custody. Ellis attended in person, his presence a silent challenge. As Sloan presented his case, the room was heavy with judgment, but Ellis countered with calm, undeniable evidence of Rhea's unwavering devotion and the genuine, positive impact their presence had on Nova's life. After hours of debate, the board postponed their decision, recognizing the complexity but clearly shaken by the strength of their combined stand. That evening, Ellis sat on the couch beside Rhea and Nova. The weight of the day hung in the air, but so did a fragile hope. Nova tugged on Ellis's sleeve. "Do you think we're really a family now?" Ellis smiled, heart full. Yes. Nova, more than ever. Rhea squeezed his hand. "We're stronger together." But Ellis knew the fight was far from over. The world outside their apartment was watching and waiting. It rained that Friday. Not a storm, just a steady, whispering drizzle that softened the edges of the city. Raindrops threaded their way down the apartment windows like silent questions, and the sky stayed a dull pewter all afternoon. Ellis had planned to take Nova to the aquarium, but with the weather as it was, he texted Rhea instead. "Still want company?" Her reply came quickly. "Always." He arrived just before 5. The door was unlocked. Nova had insisted they leave it that way for Mr. M. Fridays. When he stepped inside, she was already waiting by the shoe rack, clutching her stuffed bear Rufus under one arm and wearing rain boots 3 sizes too big. "You came," she said simply, as if that was enough to make the whole day better. He knelt beside her. Wouldn't miss it. They played board games that evening, one with a broken spinner that made the rules confusing and hilarious. Rhea cooked chili, humming softly in the kitchen, and Ellis joined her after Nova fell asleep in the blanket fort they'd built from couch cushions and an old comforter. The two of them stood side by side at the sink, elbows brushing occasionally, their voices hushed so as not to wake the little girl snoring in the living room. "She had a rough day," Rhea murmured, scrubbing a spoon. Ellis dried the bowl in his hands. "What happened?" One of the kids asked if she was adopted, then asked why her dad looked different. Ellis stiffened. "What did she say?" "She said she didn't care if he looked different, that he makes her feel safe." He exhaled slowly. "I just keep thinking," Rhea said, her voice low. "What if we're setting her up for disappointment?" He looked over at her, unsure how to answer. She continued, "I see how she lights up around you, but kids don't understand the gray areas. They don't know how fragile almost can be." "I'm not an almost," Ellis said gently. Rhea met his gaze. "But are you a forever?" The question landed between them with more weight than he expected. "I don't know," he admitted. "I want to be, but I've spent so long being no one's anything. I don't know if I remember how." She dried her hands and leaned against the counter. "I don't need a promise. I just need to know if your heart is in this." He nodded. Slowly. "It is," he said, "even if I'm still figuring out what this is." Silence followed, but it wasn't tense. It was honest, and in a world full of masks and noise, honesty felt like its own kind of intimacy. Later, they sat on the floor beside the blanket fort, sipping warm tea while Nova slept inside. Her soft breaths came in little huffs, her stuffed bear curled under her chin. Ellis watched her for a long time. "She doesn't sleep this soundly unless she feels safe," Rhea whispered. He glanced over. "She does now. She does with you here." He didn't respond right away. The truth sat heavy in his chest, not because it scared him, but because he realized just how much it mattered. "Rhea," he said after a long pause, "do you ever wonder what your life would have looked like if Nova's father had stayed?" She considered the question for a moment, then shook her head. "No, because then I might not have become the woman I am now, and I wouldn't have learned to stand on my own." He nodded slowly, admiring her strength, the quiet resilience stitched into every word she said. "I still feel like I'm carrying pieces of who I used to be." Ellis admitted, "Some days I think I've healed. Other days, I still hear his laugh. Your son." He nodded. "Jordan. He used to draw monsters. Not scary ones, silly ones. Always with big glasses and tiny shoes. I'd ask him what they ate, and he'd say, 'Sad feelin's and broccoli.'" Rhea smiled. "Sounds like he would have been best friends with Nova." He chuckled. "Yeah, I think they would have been a storm together." They sat there in silence again, the kind of silence that doesn't ask to be filled. Eventually, Rhea rested her head on his shoulder. "I'm tired," she said softly, "but it feels different with you here, like the kind of tired that means you're finally home." Ellis didn't move. He just let her rest, and for the first time in years, he let himself rest too. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the world still glistened like it remembered. It was a Wednesday morning when everything shifted again. Ellis was pouring coffee in his apartment when he heard the sharp slip of paper against his front door, the kind of sound that carried weight even before he saw what it was. He walked over, picked up the folded envelope, and turned it over in his hands. No name, no return address, just thick cream paper and clean edges. Inside was a single page, typed, formal, clinical. It was a notice, a court summons regarding a petition to challenge the custodial suitability of Ms. Rhea Bell, filed by Wesley Grant and Cynthia Grant, on the grounds of environmental instability, inconsistent employment history, and concerns about the psychological well-being of the child. Ellis read it twice, then a third time. His hand trembled slightly by the end, not from fear, but from rage. They had done it. They'd gone from whispers to war. He grabbed his phone, heart thudding as he dialed Rhea. No answer. He called again. Still nothing, fighting the surge of panic rising in his chest. He grabbed his keys and rushed to his car. By the time he reached her apartment building, he was rehearsing what to say, how to steady her, how to fight this together. But when he knocked, the door opened slowly. Rhea stood there in silence, eyes red but dry. She already knew. They came to the library, she said before he could speak. Had someone hand me the notice like it was a delivery order. Ellis exhaled. "I got a copy, too. I guess this is happening," she said quietly, stepping aside to let him in. Nova wasn't home. A friend from school had invited her over for a play date, blissfully unaware of what was unfolding between the adults in her life. The apartment felt different without her. Still warm, but heavier. Rhea sat down at the table, arms crossed, not in defense, but in self-protection. "They want to drag my name through court," she said. "List every overdue bill I've ever had. Every time I picked up a second job, they'll say I'm unstable because I raised her alone." Ellis sat across from her. "They'll fail. Maybe, or maybe they'll paint a picture people want to believe. That wealth equals love. That polished shoes and prep schools mean better parenting. You're not alone in this, but you're not Nova's legal guardian," she whispered. "That matters in court." Ellis leaned forward. "Then let's change that." She blinked. "What I'll file to become a co-guardian, not to take anything from you, but to give this family legal standing, to make it real in the eyes of the court." Rhea looked away. "Do you trust me?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "I want to. I'm not here to replace you, or to be some savior. I'm here because I love her, and I'm beginning to—" He stopped himself. Her eyes met his. "Say it. I'm beginning to love you too." The air between them shifted. Rhea's hand reached for his, slowly, as if crossing a tightrope. "We do this together," she said, "and only if Nova agrees. She's already chosen us." He replied. That night, they told Nova. They kept it gentle, simple. Ellis explained what it meant to be part of her life, not just in hugs and stories, but on paper. That it would help them stay a family, even when others tried to pull them apart. Nova looked between them, her expression serious in a way that didn't quite belong to a 6-year-old. "Does this mean I'll have 2 parents again?" she asked. "You've always had a mama," Rhea said softly, "but now you'll have someone else too. Not instead of me. With me." Nova turned to Ellis. "Do you want to be my daddy for real?" He felt his throat catch. "Yes," he said, "if you'll let me." She nodded slowly, then reached into her backpack. She pulled out a drawing, a house with 3 stick figures, a tall one, a medium one, and a small one holding a bear. She pointed to them in order. "You, Mama, me. That's our team." The next morning, Ellis made the call. His legal team was skeptical at first. "You're talking about filing for co-guardianship of a child who isn't biologically yours, with no prior foster care structure, and during an active custodial petition from a third party," one lawyer warned. "It's a long shot." "I don't care," Ellis said. "Do it." Within days, the media caught wind of the filings. Headlines spread tech mogul files to co-parent child of librarian amid custody dispute. Talk shows speculated, online forums debated, and then came the televised interview Wesley and Cynthia Grant, seated on a velvet couch, speaking in carefully rehearsed sympathy. "We only want what's best for Nova," Wesley said. "She deserves stability, not entanglements with public figures and unstable income households." Ellis watched the segment alone, jaw clenched. He recognized the tone, the coded language, the kind that said everything without saying anything at all. When Rhea called that night, her voice was steady. "They want to fight," she said. "They'll get one." Ellis exhaled. "You okay?" "I've spent 6 years surviving," she replied. "Now I'm ready to live." Court was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Until then, Ellis, Rhea, and Nova returned to normal life as best they could. But nothing felt normal anymore. At school, Nova noticed the stares, the whispered comments, the other kids repeating words they didn't understand but had heard at dinner tables. One afternoon, she came home with her fists clenched. "Liam said I'm not lucky, that I'm confused about what Rhea asked." Kneeling beside her, he said, "I have a pretend daddy and a pretend home." Ellis sat beside her. "You're not confused. Nova, you're brave, braver than most grown-ups I know. Then why don't they see it? Because they're not looking." Rhea said, "But we are." That night, Nova pulled a blanket onto the living room floor and insisted they all sleep there together like camping. She said, Rhea made popcorn, Ellis brought flashlights, and they lay in the glow of shared light, hearts wrapped in quiet defiance. They didn't need permission to be a family. They already were. The courthouse was cold. Not physically, though the air conditioning was overly ambitious, but emotionally. The waiting room outside courtroom 3B had the sterile, impersonal quality of every space built to handle other people's pain. Beige chairs, white walls, muted lighting, everything designed to keep feeling small. Ellis sat with his hands folded over his knees, elbows tight, suit crisp and silent. His tie felt too tight, and the silence around them pressed in from every direction. Rhea was beside him, shoulders straight, her palms resting on the fabric of her dress like she was keeping herself from unraveling. She hadn't said much since they arrived, just quiet nods, brief glances. She hadn't even touched the tea Ellis handed her earlier, but her breathing was steady, strong. Nova sat between them, legs swinging, oblivious in the way only children can be when the room is heavy with tension. She clutched Rufus, her stuffed bear, and whispered to him occasionally, like they were in on some secret the adults had forgotten. Ellis watched her and remembered what Rhea had once said. She doesn't sleep this soundly unless she feels safe. He hoped she still felt that way now. The door opened, and a tall, broad man with graying hair stepped out, Judge Merriman, known in the district for being sharp, unsentimental, and impossible to sway with emotion. Just facts, just law, Ms. Bell, Mr. Monroe, he said. We'll begin in 10 minutes. Rhea nodded, standing slowly. Yes, Your Honor. Ellis followed her into the courtroom, every step echoing with the knowledge that this space was not built for grace, it was built for judgment. At the far end of the room sat Wesley and Cynthia Grant. Perfect posture, perfect suits, a lawyer on either side. They didn't even glance at Ellis or Rhea. They were already performing for the judge who hadn't yet entered. Ellis could feel the heat crawl up his neck. He didn't hate many people, but there was something about the Grant's cold certainty that made his hands want to clench into fists. Their lawyer began the arguments with polished language about child welfare, educational opportunities, and socioeconomic disparities. Every word was meant to suggest that money meant safety, that power meant love. She deserves a stable environment, the lawyer said smoothly, one not compromised by a single parent barely making ends meet, nor entangled with a corporate figure whose interest, while perhaps sincere, is unsubstantiated. Ellis felt Rhea stiffen beside him. His jaw tightened, but he didn't speak yet. Then it was their turn. Rhea stood first. Her voice was low, clear, and unwavering. I've raised Nova since the day she was born. I've worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. I've missed sleep, missed meals, but never missed a bedtime story. Never missed a parent-teacher meeting. Never missed being her mother. The judge nodded, and Mr. Monroe's involvement. She glanced at Ellis, then back at the judge. Unexpected, but undeniable. He's been more present than some biological parents I've seen. More protective, more invested. Then Ellis stood. He didn't read from notes. He didn't cite figures or credentials. He spoke plainly. I lost a son. He began. Not to the system, not to custody battles, to something that didn't ask permission and accident. Silence filled the room like water in a sinking boat. I spent 5 years keeping people out. I thought it was safer, quieter. But then a little girl asked me, "Can you pretend to be my daddy, just for one day?" And I couldn't say no. He looked over at Nova, who gave him a small, sleepy smile. She didn't want gifts or protection. She wanted someone to show up, and I did, and I haven't stopped. He looked back at the judge. I'm not pretending anymore. The room fell still. Wesley stood, trying to regain ground. Mr. Monroe has no legal precedent to claim guardianship, but the law allows for extraordinary petitions when the child's emotional bond is evident. Judge Merriman replied calmly, "We'll take a recess." As the judge left the room, Ellis sat back down, heart pounding in his throat. Rhea took his hand. Her grip was strong, no longer hesitant. "You were perfect," she whispered. "I wasn't trying to be. I know," she said. "That's why it worked." They were quiet for a moment. The room slowly emptied, attorneys heading to the hallway to huddle. Nova looked up at Ellis, her voice barely above a breath. "Do we get to go home together after this?" He nodded. "We do." She smiled. "Then I don't care what they say." When the judge returned, the atmosphere changed. There were more questions, more arguments, more positioning, but none of it mattered as much as the small things. Like the way Nova held both Ellis and Rhea's hands without hesitation. Like the way she whispered, "I love you" to both of them before sitting alone in the child witness seat. Or how, when the judge asked her how she defined family, she responded without blinking. "Family is when somebody stays." That afternoon, the court didn't make a final ruling. There would be another hearing, more testimony, more documentation, but Judge Merriman left them with this. "It is clear to the court that Nova Bell has formed a meaningful, stabilizing relationship with both Ms. Bell and Mr. Monroe. The court encourages a shared custody arrangement while we evaluate the long-term petition." Wesley didn't hide his scowl as he stood. Cynthia gripped her bag a little tighter. But Ellis exhaled for the first time in hours. They stepped out into the hallway and the light caught Rhea's face just right, tired, but bright. "We didn't lose," she said. "We didn't win either." He replied. "No," she said, "but we're still standing. That matters." Nova ran ahead to press the elevator button, hopping in place with excitement. Ellis turned to Rhea. "I meant what I said in there. I know. Do you believe it?" She nodded. "I believe you." And, for the first time, Ellis didn't feel like he was chasing something that had already left him behind. He was building something. And this time, he wasn't alone. The next week passed in a hush. Not silence, exactly, but the hush that follows a storm, when the sky still hangs low and heavy and you're not sure whether the quiet means it's over or just waiting to begin again. Ellis found himself moving through his days like someone walking through fog. Meetings blurred together. His assistant mentioned something about a press interview request, but he declined it without a second thought. His heart, it seemed, had drifted out of his office and taken up permanent residence in Rhea's apartment. It was there, on a quiet Thursday evening, that the next unraveling began. Nova had fallen asleep early, curled against Ellis's side while he read her a chapter from an old fantasy novel. Rhea was washing dishes when her phone buzzed on the counter. Ellis saw the way her body froze, just for a second. She dried her hands, picked it up, and read the screen. Her face didn't change, but he knew something had shifted. "What is it?" he asked. She turned the screen toward him. It was an email. From a private investigator, subject details confirmed on past financial activity, Cynthia Grant. Attached was a folder of documents, screenshots, and banking history that showed exactly what Rhea had suspected but never dared say aloud. The Grants had been trying to paint Rhea as unstable by manipulating her bank history. Anonymous donations had been made to her account under fake charitable programs later cited in court as evidence of irregular income. Even her landlord had been approached to testify about missed rent, a story fed to him by a third-party legal team. Rhea sat down at the table slowly, her breath measured. "They've been setting this up for a year," she whispered. Maybe longer. Ellis didn't say anything right away. He looked at the file again, reading the trail of forged names, shell accounts, payments made in Rhea's name for purchases she never authorized. It's fraud, he said, malicious. We can take them down with this. But what does that mean for Nova Rhea's voice cracked? Does she have to go through another hearing, another round of questions from strangers who don't see her, who just want to own her like a prize? Ellis walked around the table, crouched in front of her, and took both her hands in his. We don't let this break her, he said. We use it to end this. No more halfway, no more fear. That night, after Rhea fell asleep on the couch, Ellis sat in the dark beside the window. He looked out at the city, its soft buzz, its steady lights, and thought about everything he used to believe made a man successful. Status, control, legacy. But here he was, stripped of all of that in the places that mattered most, and yet he felt more whole than he had in years. His mind drifted to Jordan, his son, and the final words he'd said to him before the accident. I'll be home late. Be good for Mom. Okay. He had replayed that moment 1,000 times since, rewritten it, reimagined it, but tonight, for the first time, he didn't see Jordan's face twisted in grief. He saw Nova, peaceful, trusting, whole. Maybe grief never really left. Maybe it just changed shape. Maybe it became a map you had to carry to find your way home again. The next morning, they met with Julia Ramos, the court-appointed attorney who had always believed in Rhea, even when the system hadn't. Julia reviewed the file, her eyes widening. This isn't just a smear campaign, she said. This is criminal. Can we use it to stop the custody petition? Rhea asked. Julia nodded slowly. Yes, not only that. We may be able to file charges and reopen the case as an abusive process. Ellis watched Rhea absorb the news. She didn't celebrate. She didn't even smile. She just nodded. We go forward, she said, all the way. Later that evening, Nova came home with a painting from school. It was crude, colorful, and beautiful in the way only a 6-year-old's art could be. She handed it to Ellis. It's our house, she said, when we don't have to be scared anymore. Ellis knelt beside her, holding the paper like a fragile promise. There are 3 people in the window, he said. That us? Nova nodded. You, Mama, me. Rufus is on the roof. He watches the sky. Ellis smiled. You gave him the best seat. Nova tilted her head. He likes watching what's coming. That night, as they ate dinner together, the light outside changed. The sky turned deep blue, fading into the purple of early evening. Rhea passed the salad. Ellis poured Nova's juice. They laughed at a joke none of them would remember later, and yet the moment etched itself deep in the folds of their lives. After Nova was tucked in, Rhea joined Ellis on the balcony. You know, she said softly, I used to think stability meant being untouched. Like, if I could just get my life in order, nothing could hurt her again. Ellis listened. But I'm learning, she continued, that real stability is showing up even when everything's cracked. Not hiding the cracks, just choosing to hold them together. He looked over at her. You hold everything together, he said, even when it's fallen apart. She shook her head. So do you. And then, without fear, without hesitation, she reached for his hand. I'm not afraid of forever anymore, she said. Ellis closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, they were wet. I don't think I've ever known what forever looked like, he said. But I think maybe it's this. They sat in silence, the city alive beneath them, the stars slowly waking above. Inside, Nova slept with her painting beside her bed. Outside, the people who loved her finally stopped running from the weight of love. And for the first time in years, Ellis no longer wondered if he deserved to feel whole. He just did. It was late April when they returned to the courthouse. The trees outside were beginning to bloom soft white petals scattered across the steps like tiny pieces of paper drifting from the sky. The air felt lighter, somehow, not because the storm had passed, but because they had learned how to walk through it together. Rhea wore a navy dress, simple and strong. Her curls were pulled back, but a few strands framed her face. She didn't try to hide the fatigue. She wore it like armor. Ellis stood beside her in a gray suit, no tie, no shield, just calm. Nova clutched both their hands. She had insisted on wearing her favorite yellow dress, the one with sunflowers stitched along the hem. Rufus, her bear, wore a bow tie. This time, they didn't sit in the waiting room. They were ushered straight in. The Grants weren't there. 2 days earlier, their legal team had withdrawn from the petition. After the fraud evidence had been reviewed and quietly escalated to the district attorney's office, everything fell apart for Wesley and Cynthia. Their names were now attached to terms like coercion, evidence tampering, and defamation of character. They didn't issue an apology, but they didn't need to. Their absence said enough. Inside the courtroom, it wasn't dramatic, no gavel banging, no high-stakes declarations, just paperwork. Ellis watched as the judge reviewed the final petition for joint custody and co-guardianship. There were no objections, no questions, just a signature, a few legal formalities, and then it was done. Ellis looked over at Rhea, whose eyes were glassy with disbelief. Then down at Nova, who squeezed his hand. "Does this mean we're real now?" she whispered. Ellis knelt so he could look her in the eyes. "You were always real," he said. "Now the world knows it too." They left the courthouse into golden sunlight. The wind was soft, tugging gently at Nova's dress. She twirled in it, giggling, her bear swinging in her arms. Ellis stood at the edge of the stairs, just watching, not thinking, just being. Rhea walked up beside him. "We made it," she said. He nodded. "We did." There was a pause. "You remember the first day we met?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "The bookstore, the spilled tea, the sadness we didn't know how to name yet. You looked like a man who didn't believe in hope anymore." "I was," he said. "And you were the woman who reminded me how to breathe." They stood there for a moment, the city moving behind them, Nova dancing ahead. Then Ellis reached into his jacket pocket. "There's one more thing." Rhea looked over, brows raised. He didn't kneel, didn't make a speech. He simply held out a small velvet box and opened it. Inside was a ring not flashy, but elegant. A gold band, warm and simple, with a tiny engraving on the inner edge. "Home is who we choose." Rhea covered her mouth, tears rising too quickly for her to stop them. "I'm not asking you to be perfect," Ellis said quietly. "I'm asking you to be us, to keep building this thing we found." She took the box from him gently, then reached for his hand. "I was already yours," she said. "This just makes it official." Behind them, Nova shouted, "Did you just get married?" Rhea laughed through her tears. "Not yet, baby. But soon. Can I be the flower girl?" Nova asked, spinning again. You can be whatever you want," Ellis called back. That night, they celebrated at Alma Monroe's house, Ellis's mother, who'd insisted on making a full dinner even though she swore she didn't cook anymore. "I make exceptions for miracles," she said, setting down a casserole dish. Rhea met Alma in the kitchen before dinner. "You raised a good man," she said softly. Alma smiled. "He was always good. He just forgot for a while." They all sat around the table, Alma at the head, Rhea and Ellis side by side, Nova bouncing in her seat between bites of macaroni. It was messy, warm, loud in a way Ellis had forgotten homes could be. After dinner, Nova climbed into Ellis's lap and whispered, "Do you think my real daddy would be happy?" Ellis paused, then brushed her hair behind her ear. "I think he'd be proud of you," he said, "for being brave, for opening your heart. And I think he'd be thankful that you gave someone else a second chance to try again." Nova leaned her head against his chest. "I think Rufus likes you too," she murmured. Ellis smiled. "That's the real test." Huh. Later that night, Ellis walked outside to the backyard. The stars had started to break through the clouds. He looked up, exhaled, and said something he hadn't said in a long time. Thank you. To the sky, to Jordan, to whatever force had set that little girl in his path one rainy afternoon, with her tiny voice and her impossible question. "Sir, could you pretend to be my daddy?" Just for one day he had said yes. And in doing so, he'd stepped into the one thing he never thought he'd have again. Not just love, not just redemption, a life, a family, the kind that didn't pretend, the kind that stayed. And as he walked back into the house where Nova was laughing, and Rhea was smiling, and Alma was humming to herself in the kitchen, Ellis knew the truth of it all. He hadn't been pretending that day. He just needed someone brave enough to ask him to try. And Nova had been that someone. The smallest hands had opened the biggest door, and this time, Ellis Monroe was walking through it for good. Character notes. Final Ellis Monroe. Fully transformed. From grieving father to present, devoted partner and dad by choice. A man who learns to love again through service, not performance. Rhea Bell completes her arc from struggling single mother to empowered co-parent and partner. She finally feels safe, chosen, seen. Nova Bell. The soul of the story. Her innocence and courage redefined two broken lives and created one unshakable family. Sometimes, the deepest kind of love isn't born from blood, but from choice, from courage, from a quiet little voice asking, "Will you stay?" and someone saying yes. In a world still scarred by racism, judgment, and outdated notions of who belongs where, this story reminds us that love doesn't need permission, that dignity should never be denied because of a paycheck, a zip code, or the color of someone's skin. Ellis Monroe didn't become a father again by accident. He chose to show up when it mattered. He chose to love past fear, past grief, and past public opinion. And because of that, a little girl didn't just get a new father. She got the kind of future every child deserves. But we must ask ourselves, how many Novas are still waiting to be seen? How many families are quietly erased by systems that pretend to protect? And when the moment comes, will we choose to stay? Let this story stir your heart, but also your conscience. Let it move you to kindness, and let it challenge every bias you didn't know you were still holding. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, because the next story might just be yours.